The hand moved before his mind gave the order. 1 second, John Siwon was standing in the middle of the 2 train, holding the overhead rail with 2 fingers, eyes half closed after a 16-hour day. And the next, his right hand was inside his jacket, fingers wrapped around cold steel. Every muscle in his body locked and ready. The car lurched. Fluorescent light flickered. Across the aisle, a woman's box braid swung as she was yanked backward by the arm. The man gripping her was loud, red-faced, the kind of loud that meant he wanted an audience. His fingers were buried in the soft brown skin of her forearm, and she was pulling, quiet and furious and refusing to make a sound. The other passengers looked away. Siwon did not look away. His eyes moved from the man's grip to the woman's face. She wasn't crying. Her jaw was set, her warm brown eyes cold with a specific kind of rage, the kind that comes not from surprise, but from recognition. She had felt this grip before. His hand tightened around the gun. Not yet, something said. Watch. She twisted her arm. Failed. Tried again. The man laughed and pulled her closer. Siwon's feet moved on their own. Let's go back to where it all started. 48 hours earlier, on a Tuesday morning when the city was grey, and Amara Ellis almost didn't get on that train at all. Tuesday, 6:14 a.m., Upper Manhattan. Amara Ellis had 3 alarms on her phone and ignored all of them. Not because she was lazy, because her body had learned. Somewhere between her second job and her third, that sleep was a currency, and she was always overdrawn. By the time she finally sat up in the narrow bed of her studio apartment, the radiator was clanging, and the first pale light of November was cutting through the blinds in thin grey lines. She sat still for exactly 11 seconds. That was all she allowed herself. Then she stood, moved to the bathroom, twisted the shower knob, and stepped under water that took 3 minutes to get lukewarm. 3 minutes she spent mentally calculating. Hospital admin shift started at 7:30. The evening waitressing shift at the restaurant on Amsterdam Avenue started at 6. In between, a 4-hour gap she usually spent sleeping on the break room couch at the hospital, eating whatever someone had left in the communal fridge. 42 days, she thought, as she pressed her face into the spray. 42 more days of this, and I'll have enough for the deposit on the Atlanta apartment. Atlanta was the plan, had been the plan for 8 months, ever since she'd understood that staying in New York, in this specific borough, in this specific city, meant staying within reach of Marcus Webb. The thought of his name made her shoulders go rigid. She pushed it down, the way she pushed everything down, into some quiet and very controlled place in the center of her chest. She had learned to do this. Her mother called it stubborn. Her sister called it strength. Amara just called it necessary. She was 27 years old and she had a plan. Plans were what got you through. She was at the train station by 6:50, box braids pinned up under a beanie, her hospital ID clipped to her coat. The platform smelled like cold air and fast food grease. She stood near the yellow line, hands in her pockets, letting her mind go quiet the way it only did in transit, when she was between one place and the next, between one version of her day and another. She didn't notice the man at the far end of the platform until the train arrived. Later, she would try to reconstruct that first moment. What she registered: tall, Korean, white shirt visible beneath a dark wool coat that probably cost more than her rent. Black hair pushed back from a face that was all hard angles and deliberate stillness. He was looking at nothing in particular, or rather, he was looking at everything, the way people do when they are used to watching. She didn't think about him after that. She stepped onto the train, found a pole, pulled out her phone. She had 6 unread messages from a number she'd blocked 3 times. Her stomach dropped. Marcus. He'd gotten a new number. Again. She stood very still in the rocking train car and read the messages in order, the way you read bad news, quickly, bracing, trying to get through it before the full weight could land. He knew she was still in New York. He knew her hospital. He had seen her last Thursday on 125th Street, and she hadn't noticed. I just want to talk, Amara. Why are you making this so hard? The familiar nausea, the familiar urge to throw the phone across the car. She locked the screen instead, put the phone away, focused on the advertisement above the opposite row of seats. A smiling woman in a yellow raincoat, selling something she couldn't read. 42 days. She got off at her stop, walked the 4 blocks to the hospital in the cold, clocked in 2 minutes before 7:30, and spent the next 8 hours doing the most precise and invisible work she knew, processing insurance claims, managing appointment databases, answering calls with a patient's voice that cost her nothing because she was very good at giving nothing away. At 3 o'clock, her supervisor, Diana, stopped at her desk and asked if she was feeling all right. "Fine," Amara said, and smiled the way she had practiced. Diana looked at her for one long second. "You know you work too hard." "I know," Amara agreed pleasantly, and turned back to her screen. At 5:15 she clocked out, changed out of her scrubs in the bathroom, and sent her sister Kezia a text that said, "Still here, still standing. Their shorthand for nothing has gone wrong today." Kezia sent back a prayer hands emoji and a string of hearts. She was on the downtown 2 train by 5:40, standing in the middle of the car, box braids down now, running late for her 6 o'clock shift because the crosstown bus had been delayed. She was checking her phone for the transit update when she felt a hand close around her arm. She knew that grip before she looked up. Want to know what happens next? Keep watching. Marcus Webb looked exactly the way he always looked, like someone who had spent years learning how to take up space. He was broad-shouldered, well-dressed, wearing that specific expression of injured calm that Amara had once, in what felt like another lifetime, mistaken for patience. She knew better now. She knew the whole vocabulary of his face, the tight set of his mouth that meant he'd already decided the conversation's ending, the slight tilt of his chin that meant he expected her to fold. "Amara." His voice was low for the train. Controlled. "I've been calling you." "I know." She kept her voice flat, pulled against his grip carefully. "Let go of my arm, Marcus. I just want to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "You're being dramatic." He said it the way he always said it, with a patience so elaborate it became its own kind of cruelty. "I'm not trying to fight, I'm trying to—" "Marcus." She pulled again. The braids she'd worn loose today swung forward, and she pushed them back with her free hand, jaw set, eyes steady on his face. "Let go of my arm. Right now." Around them, the car was doing what subway cars do in moments like these, contracting. Passengers who had been looking at their phones were very pointedly continuing to look at their phones. A woman near the door shifted her weight. A man in a delivery uniform found something absorbing outside the window, where there was nothing but dark tunnel. Amara felt the familiar tightening in her chest, not panic. She refused to let it be panic, and pulled again. He tightened his grip. "I paid your rent for 2 years, Marcus said, and now the pleasant calm was gone, and what was underneath it was worse. 2 years. And you left. Without a conversation, I gave you a conversation. I gave you several conversations." Her voice was still low, still controlled, still burning. "You didn't like what I had to say, because what you said was—" He stopped. He stopped because something had changed in the air of the car. Amara felt it before she understood it. A shift in the pressure. A new kind of stillness. The particular silence that arrives when someone who knows how to be dangerous enters a room. She looked to her left. The man from the platform was standing 2 feet away, close enough that she could see the tattoo on his neck, a black serpent coiled around a lotus blossom, ink so dark it seemed to absorb light. He was not looking at Marcus. He was not looking at her. He appeared for all the world to be reading the transit map on the wall above the doors, but his right hand had moved inside his coat, and Marcus had seen it. She watched Marcus's face cycle through 3 expressions in the span of 1 second: confusion, wariness, and then something she had never seen there before, something that looked almost like fear. The man still wasn't looking at him. "I think," the man said very quietly, "that the lady asked you to let go." His voice was low, even. It did not rise at the end the way a question does, or sharpen the way a threat usually does. It simply arrived in the air of the train car and sat there, dense as stone. Marcus released her arm. Amara didn't move. She stood very still, her pulse loud in her ears, and looked at the man who had spoken. He turned his head finally, and his dark eyes met hers. They held something she couldn't immediately name, not warmth exactly, something more like assessment, like he was checking that she was all right without asking her to perform being all right. "Next stop is yours," he said, to her specifically. Not a question. It wasn't her stop, but she nodded. She didn't know it yet, but that nod would change everything. "Keep watching, this is the moment." The two trains shuddered into the 72nd Street station, and the doors opened, and Amara Ellis stepped onto the platform, and the man in the dark coat stepped out behind her, and Marcus Webb stayed on the train, because Marcus Webb was at his core, someone who understood when a situation had tilted beyond his control. The doors closed. Amara stood on the platform in the sudden quiet of the station, her heart still hammering, her arm aching where Marcus had gripped it. She turned. The man was 3 feet away, watching the train pull out. In the station light, she could see him more clearly than she'd been able to in the flickering fluorescent dark of the car. Mid-30s, lean in the way of someone who moved constantly, rather than trained deliberately, the white shirt beneath his coat, missing several buttons at the collar. The neck tattoo, Serpent Lotus, rose above the open collar like a signature. He turned from the departing train and looked at her. "You know him," he said. It wasn't a question. She answered it anyway. "He's my ex." She kept her chin level. "He doesn't take no very well." A pause. Something moved through his expression. Brief, controlled, gone. "Is this the first time he's done this?" Amara looked at him for a long moment. He had a still face. The kind of face that gave away very little but absorbed everything. She'd met people like that before, usually in positions of authority, usually men who'd had to decide at some early point in their lives to stop announcing themselves. "No," she said, honest because there was no point in being otherwise. He nodded once as if she'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. He reached into his breast pocket and produced a card. Plain, matte black, no embossing. Just a phone number in small silver type. "My name is Jeon Siwon," he said. "I own properties in this neighborhood. If that man bothers you again—" He stopped, reconsidered. "If anyone bothers you again, call that number." Amara looked at the card. She did not reach for it immediately. Something in her, the same stubborn thing that had made her survive 2 years with Marcus, that had made her build a plan out of 42 days and a deposit she didn't have yet, pushed back against accepting help from a stranger. "Why?" she asked. He seemed to expect this. His head tilted a fraction. "Because you were handling it, and then you weren't." The briefest pause. "And I was there." She looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then she took the card. "Amara Ellis," she said. "I know." At her expression, "Your hospital ID. I saw it on the platform this morning." He paused again. "I was on the 6:50 train." She remembered him then. The coat, the stillness. "You were watching me." "I was watching the platform." A beat. "I watch everything." She believed him. She wasn't sure whether that was reassuring or not. She tucked the card into her coat pocket and glanced toward the exit stairs. She was late, past late now, for her 6 o'clock shift. Her manager would have thoughts. Her tips would suffer. "Thank you," she said, genuinely. "For what you did." He gave a small, precise nod, not dismissive, but complete. The gesture of a man who had been thanked for things he considered simply the done thing. She turned and walked toward the exit. She was 3 steps away when he spoke again. "The grip marks will bruise by tonight." She stopped, didn't turn around. His voice was the same measured quiet as before. "There's a pharmacy on the corner of Amsterdam and 72nd. Ice pack, arnica gel. It'll help." She stood there for 1 suspended second. Then she said without turning, "I know. I've done this before." She felt the weight of his silence behind her. Not uncomfortable, but present, like a hand on a door that hadn't been pushed yet. She walked up the stairs and out into the cold November air and didn't look back. She bought the arnica gel, and she kept the card. 3 days passed. She saw him again on Thursday at 7 in the morning, on the same platform. He was there when she arrived in a different coat, but the same unbothered stillness, a cup of coffee from the cart at the corner balanced in one hand. He didn't greet her effusively. He nodded, the same precise nod, and she nodded back, and they stood 12 feet apart on the platform until the train came. On the train, they stood on the same pole. She didn't know how to explain the way this felt, not threatening, not romantic, not complicated. simply like standing next to someone who had already proved they could be trusted with one small, specific thing. "Is the arm better?" he asked at some point between stops. "Yes." She flexed it, demonstrating. "You were right about the arnica. My mother swore by it, the first personal detail he'd offered. He seemed to notice he'd offered it, and he didn't retract it, but he didn't elaborate either." "Is she still—" "No." Quiet. Final. "I'm sorry," Amara said. He turned his head and looked at her. Really looked, the way he'd looked on the subway platform 3 days ago. "She died when I was 19, he said. "She worked double shifts." A pause. She was proud of it. Amara heard what he wasn't saying. She turned to face forward. "My mother worked double shifts too," she said. "She used to say sleep was for people who had already won." The corner of his mouth moved, just barely, not quite a smile, but the shadow of one. "She sounds like someone I would have respected," he said. "She was," Amara said. "She still is. She just retired." The not-quite smile deepened by a millimeter. They rode the rest of the way in a silence that was, for the first time in recent memory, entirely comfortable. His men saw everything. And for the first time in years, Saiwon found himself hoping he'd run into the same problem on the same train tomorrow. "Keep watching." The call came on a Saturday. Amara had the morning off, her one true morning off in any given week, and she was in her apartment with her braids undone, conditioning her hair, an old Lauryn Hill album playing through her phone speaker, eating cereal because she hadn't had time to grocery shop since Tuesday. The number on her screen wasn't Marcus's, wasn't one she recognized. She picked up anyway, because she'd learned, from her mother from experience, that not picking up only delays things. "Ms. Ellis." A man's voice, low, unhurried, vaguely Korean accented. Not Siwon, older, more formal. "My name is Park. I work for Mr. Jeon. He would like to speak with you if you're available." She set down her cereal. "About what?" A brief pause. "There was an incident last night near your workplace. Mr. Jeon has reason to believe you should be aware of it." Her stomach tightened. "What incident?" Another pause, and then Siwon's voice replaced Park's, low and direct. "Marcus Webb was seen near St. Luke's Hospital last night. He was watching the night entrance. He left before security could approach him." Silence. Amara looked at the wall across from her. The water from her hair was dripping down the back of her neck. "How do you know that?" she asked. "I have people who watch my neighborhood." A beat. "You work in my neighborhood." She absorbed this. "You had someone watching me?" "I had someone watching the block." The distinction was careful, and she could hear that he'd made it intentionally. "You appeared on a camera. My people recognized you and called me." She should have found this alarming. She waited to find it alarming, probing at the feeling the way you probe a bruise. What arrived instead was something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten it was a thing that could exist. The specific animal comfort of knowing that someone was paying attention. She hated that she felt it. She felt it anyway. "I'm going to call the police," she said. "There's a restraining order. He knows he's not supposed to be near my workplace." "Yes," Siwon said. "You should do that." And then, carefully, "And if you need somewhere else to be while this is addressed and somewhere he can't find, that option is also available to you." She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not running," she said. "I know. No judgment in it. I'm not suggesting you run. I'm suggesting you have options." A pause. "There's a difference." She pulled her knees to her chest, sitting on the edge of her bed, her undone hair loose around her shoulders. Outside the window, the city made its usual noise. Traffic, someone's radio, a child laughing in the building across the way. "You don't know me," she said. "Not accusatory, just factual." "No," he agreed, "but I know what I saw on that train." And then, quieter, "Nobody helped you. I've spent my whole life watching rooms where nobody helps the person who needs it. I decided a long time ago not to be part of those rooms." She thought about the 6:50 train platform, his stillness. The way he'd moved those 2 steps forward with his hand inside his coat, not because she'd asked him to, not because it would benefit him, but simply because it was the thing to be done. "If he comes back," she said slowly, "what happens?" Silence, and then, "He won't." It was not a reassurance. It was a statement of fact, the way weather is a fact. She closed her eyes. "I have a plan," she said. "I'm leaving in 42 days, Atlanta." She didn't know why she told him this. It felt important that he know she wasn't someone who needed saving. She was someone mid-save, already in progress. "I just need to get through 42 days. Siwon was quiet for a moment. She heard the sound of traffic on his end. He was outside somewhere, or near a window. 42 days is a long time to be careful alone, he said finally. "I've been doing it for 8 months. I know. And then, let me make it easier." She thought about saying no. She thought about pride and self-sufficiency, and all the things her mother had taught her about not becoming someone who needed rescue. And then she thought about the marks on her arm, mostly faded now. She thought about Marcus near the night entrance of her hospital. She thought about how tired she was, not from the double shifts, not from the early mornings, but from constant vigilance, from 8 months of sleeping lightly. "What does that look like?" she asked. "Exactly what you want it to look like," he said, "and not one thing more." She looked at the ceiling. Lauryn Hill was still playing softly. Everything is everything, what is meant to be will be, and she thought that was either very bad timing or something close to a sign, which she didn't generally believe in, except on the mornings when she needed to. "Okay," she said. "Tell me what you're thinking." What she didn't know yet was that saying okay would not just change her next 42 days. It would change everything after. Keep watching. Marcus Webb was arrested on a Tuesday, 11 days after the train incident, for violating Amara's restraining order. He'd come to her hospital. He'd been identified on camera near the night entrance 3 separate times. She had not been responsible for the very thorough documentation submitted to the DA's office. She suspected she knew who had been. She didn't ask Siwon about it directly. When she saw him on the platform that Thursday, their unofficial shared commute had become by this point an understood thing, an unspoken arrangement that neither had formally acknowledged. She simply said, "Thank you." He looked at her sideways. "For what?" She let it go. In the weeks that followed, the shape of Siwon's help was exactly what he'd said it would be. Exactly what she wanted, and not one thing more. It didn't look the way she might have imagined. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't require her to become someone who owed him something, or someone who fit into his world in some uncomfortable way. It looked like his building manager, a gentleman named Mr. Cho, offering her the apartment on the 4th floor of the building, 2 blocks from her hospital, one of Siwon's properties, at a rent that was quietly and firmly below market rate. It looked like a standing arrangement with the front desk at St. Luke's to log any suspicious individuals near the entrance. It looked like, one evening when she was walking home late from the restaurant shift, a black car sliding up alongside her and Mr. Park's voice through the cracked window. "Mr. John thought you might want a ride." She had gotten in. She had looked at Siwon, who was in the back seat with a stack of documents, and no apology. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I was in the neighborhood," he said. "You live in Koreatown. I have business on the west side." He returned to his documents. "It's not complicated." She looked at him for a long moment. In the passing streetlights, his face came and went from shadow, the sharp line of his jaw, the tattoo rising above his collar, the slight furrow between his brows as he read. "Siwon," she said. He looked up. "Why?" she asked. Not suspicious, just wanting to understand. He held her gaze for a moment, and she watched something move through his expression. Not quite discomfort, but the particular stillness of a person deciding how much to give. "My mother worked doubles," he said. "I told you that." A pause. "She needed help once. She didn't ask. Nobody offered." His eyes returned to the page. "I decided that was a kind of failure I wasn't willing to repeat." Amara sat with this for the rest of the ride. She thought about her own mother, her sister Kezia's voice in her ear every morning, the still here, still standing text chain that had kept her sane for 8 months. She thought about how different it felt, knowing help existed, from having to hold every wall up alone. When the car stopped outside her building, she turned to him. "I want to work for this," she said. "Not the apartment, I pay rent like anyone else, but this." She gestured between them, at the car, at whatever this arrangement was. I want it to be mutual. I'm a hospital administrator. I'm organized. I know how systems work. If there's something you need managed in scheduling, coordination, records, I can do it. Part-time. Properly. He looked at her the way he looked at everything. Still complete measuring. You don't have to do that, he said. I know, she said. I want to. Because I'm not looking for someone to give me things. I'm looking for... She stopped. Searched for the word. Footing. I just need footing and I'll handle the rest myself. Something in his face shifted. Small but visible, like a door easing open an inch. Monday morning, he said. 9 o'clock, my restaurant in Koreatown. He handed her a different card, not the matte black one with just the number, but a proper business card. ARA, Contemporary Korean Cuisine. There's a management role that has been empty for 3 months. I'll have my general manager walk you through it. She looked at the card, at him. This is a real job, she said. Yeah, he said simply. She put the card in her pocket. She opened the door and stepped out into the cold. Then she turned back, one hand on the car's roof, and looked at him through the open door. Your mother would have liked you, she said. The version of you that does this. His jaw moved. His eyes stayed steady on hers. And for the first time she saw something in his face that wasn't calculation or assessment or careful control. It looked, just briefly, like relief. Go inside, he said. It's cold. She smiled, the first real one, the one she didn't perform, and closed the car door. 42 days came and went. She didn't go to Atlanta. She told Kezia on the phone late one night, prepared for questions, for worry, for the thorough interrogation that comes with changing a plan you've held for 8 months. Kezia was quiet for a moment. Then, is it because of a man? It's because of a job, Amara said, and an apartment, and because I'm tired of running. Another pause. Is it also a little bit because of a man? Amara looked at the ceiling of her new apartment, larger than her old one, painted the warm cream color she'd chosen herself from a swatch Siwon's manager had left on her doorstep. Through the window, New York was doing what it always did, making noise, throwing light, insisting on itself. I'm going to call you Sunday, she said. That's a yes, Kezia said cheerfully and hung up. On a Wednesday morning in December, Amara came down to the subway platform at 6:50 and found Siwon already there, coffee from the corner cart in hand, a second cup balanced beside it on the railing. She stopped. He didn't look at her directly, just tilted his chin toward the second cup. Dark roast, he said. 2 sugars. You take the same thing every morning from the cart on Amsterdam. She walked over, picked up the cup. You watch everything, she said. I watch everything, he agreed. She stood beside him. They looked out at the dark mouth of the tunnel together, the way they had been doing, in one form or another, for 6 weeks now. I'm not leaving, she said. Not the city, not this platform, something larger, something she didn't quite have language for yet. I decided. He turned his head and looked at her. The morning light was just beginning to reach the platform, grey and cold and honest. I know, he said. You couldn't have known. The corner of his mouth moved. No. But I hoped. The train arrived in a rush of warm air and noise. They stepped on together, found the same pole, stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his coat. This was not a love story. Not yet. But it was the beginning of one. Built not on grand gestures or declarations, but on a card taken from a stranger's hand, on arnica gel, and shared commutes, and 2 cups of coffee on a platform at 6:50 in the morning. On the particular courage of saying I need footing and being heard, on the particular grace of a man who had decided, a long time ago, not to be part of rooms where no one helps. Amara Ellis was not saved. She had never needed saving. She had needed someone to stand beside her while she saved herself. And John Siwon, dangerous, quiet, relentlessly watching, had decided on a train at 5:41 p.m. on a Tuesday that he was very good at standing beside things. She's still here. She's still standing. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't standing alone. June, Koreatown. 7:30 p.m. The restaurant was full. Amara moved through the dining room the way she'd learned to move through it, efficiently, with purpose, reading the floor like sheet music. Table 4 needed water. The couple at the window were ready to order. The new hostess was getting the reservation system confused again. She handled all of it, and when the dinner rush thinned and the kitchen staff began their wind-down ritual and the servers collapsed into booths with their end-of-night sodas, she sat at the corner table she'd claimed as her unofficial office and opened her laptop. She was enrolled in a healthcare administration certification program, Tuesdays and Thursdays, online, so she could work it around her hours. She'd told her mother about it on Sunday. Her mother had been silent for so long, Amara thought the call had dropped, and then she'd said, "Baby, I always knew you'd figure it out. I just didn't know it would take this long." Amara had laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like years. Kezia was visiting next weekend. She had a long list of questions about Siwon that she had been saving up with the dedication of someone who treats other people's love lives as a hobby. We're not... Amara had started, and Kezia had made a sound of absolute disbelief, and Amara had let it go. What it was, she was still working out. She knew what it wasn't. It wasn't gratitude, and it wasn't need. And it wasn't the complicated, tangled thing she'd confused for love once before. It was slower than that. It was the 6:50 train and 2 cups of coffee and the way he'd looked at her on a December morning and said, "I know, but I hoped." She was not afraid of it. That, more than anything, felt like proof of something. The back door of the restaurant opened. Saiwon came in from a meeting that had run long, coat over one arm, tie loosened, the neck tattoo catching the warm restaurant light. He stopped at the edge of the dining room, scanned the space the way he always did, reading the room, force of habit, and then his eyes found her. He crossed the room. He sat down across from her without asking, the way he'd stopped asking, because she'd stopped needing him to. "How was the dinner service?" Sunny asked. "Good." She tilted the laptop toward him. "I found 3 scheduling inefficiencies in the reservation system. I fixed 2 of them. The third one is yours. You're double booked for a private event on the 22nd. He leaned forward to look at the screen. Close enough that she could smell the familiar sandalwood and something darker of his coat. "Fix it," he said. "I did fix it. I just need you to confirm the change." He confirmed it. Their hands were 3 inches apart on the table. "Kezia is coming next weekend," Amara said. "I know, she emailed the restaurant to make a reservation." A pause. "She said she wants the best table because she's coming to inspect the premises." Amara closed her eyes briefly. "I'm so sorry." "She's thorough," he said. "I respect it." She opened her eyes. He was looking at her with that expression she'd come to recognize, the one that wasn't quite the near smile, but was adjacent to it, the expression of a man who had spent most of his life keeping his face very still and had recently discovered that some things were worth letting show. "Siwon," she said. Thank you. For all of it. I know I've said it before. You don't have to keep saying it. I know." She held his gaze. "I want to." He was quiet for a moment. The restaurant settled around them, the clink of glasses, the low murmur of the last few tables, the kitchen staff's laughter from behind the swing door. "You built this," he said finally, meaning the job, the certification, the apartment, the plan that had transformed from Atlanta in 42 days into something she hadn't had a word for, but was beginning to recognize as home. Hai just stood on the platform. She smiled at him, the real one, the unperformed one. "You stood on the platform," she agreed, "and that was everything. Outside, New York was loud and lit and relentless, the way it always was. But in here, in this corner table in a Koreatown restaurant at 7:30 on a June evening, Amara Ellis was warm and fed and entirely, deliberately exactly where she had chosen to be, still here, still standing, and not alone.